6 o'clock, September the 5th, and we will call to order this Airport Commission meeting for the City of Forest Lake. Mr. Schmidt, would you please take roll?
Mr. Ashback.
Present.
Mr. Dahlbeck.
Present.
Mr. Eigner. Mr. Shipp.
Here.
Mr. Steeler.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Or do we have any additions or changes first, I suppose? And if not, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Makes a motion. Anyone second? You want a second? I'll second the motion if no one else will. I'll second the motion to approve the minutes from last meeting. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
I'll abstain from voting. I wasn't here last meeting.
Mr. Dahlbeck will abstain from voting, so we have 3 approving the minutes and 1 abstaining. Okay, on to the next item is Bolton and Mink. Mr. Silas Parmar is here this evening.
Well, thanks for the time again, Commissioners. Does everyone got a copy of the update memo for this month?
Yes.
All right, kind of the first item on the list is the obstruction lighting for the Runway 31 project. As we discussed at the last meeting and the Commission voted on, is moving forward with the hardwired obstruction lights, 3 of them that will be, the plan is to erect them on top of the power poles underneath the 31 approach, tie them into the existing runway circuit so they're connected with the photo eye, so whenever the runway circuit is activated, either during the evening time with the photo eye or during low light conditions in the daytime, they'll be on pilot control and also the remote, the photo eye in that respect. So I spoke with Mr. Undum, and he stated that the City Council's direction was to move forward with the hardwired lights, understanding at the last meeting, Councilmember Eigner questioned whether it made more sense to go with the solar obstruction lights over the hardwired for some cost-saving purposes. So my plan is to kind of put just a little cost proposal together to get solicit quotes for that project. Since we're expecting cost to be under 100,000, the city can undertake the simplified bid process without having to make it out for public bid. So I'm hopeful to have more information on that process at the next commission meeting. Any questions on that project? There's also the kind of the layout and the cost estimate in your packet, which it's just redundant from the last couple meetings. On to number 2 for the approach procedure survey. I finally heard back from the FAA yesterday. They are looking into providing an update as to where Forest Lake stands in the process of obtaining an RNAV GPS approach. So as soon as I hear more information, if I get it before the next meeting, I'll pass that information along to Mr. Undum for distribution to the Commission. Kind of number 3 is the west building area expansion. We started having this conversation kind of at the beginning of the year, kind of tying in with the CIP process where Commissioners, you guys were looking at work projects to develop. So the 4th page is a layout that shows kind of extension of 2 taxi lanes to kind of facilitate additional, box hangar or potential T-hangar construction, knowing that you're either, by my account, it looks like all the lots are already accounted for. Construction's either taking place or the lots are there. So as of now, if somebody wants to come in, there's not many options for them. So you can see kind of expanding to the south and then the east to allow another row of either box hangars. And then Mr. Unda made me aware there was a gentleman who was considering constructing a private T-hangar and renting that out. And it sounds like that person was unable to attend the meeting today to provide some more detail.
If I could just build off of that quickly, I was contacted by a party who was interested in building a privately held T-hangar out there and kind of wanted to start the conversation as to what needs to be done to build a T-hangar at the airport. I did tell them that we had looked at it, as the airport commission had looked at it in the past, and the numbers, when we looked at it from a rental perspective, the numbers were tough to justify the cost, the investment at that point. Their business model is a little bit different. They were gonna come tonight to speak to that, so that's kind of why Silas teed this up a little bit, to kind of look at what's the required infrastructure improvements to allow for a T-hangar to be built. However, as of 8 o'clock this morning, I got a call saying they weren't able to attend tonight. Both people who were supposed to be here had other commitments that came up last minute. So they're actually gonna hopefully come at the October meeting. But that's kind of what precipitated this conversation, was just there was a group that's interested in, building a privately owned T-hangar at the airport, and, kind of wanted to start the conversation as to what's required from a taxi lane extension, utility extension, to get that to happen out there.
Was it made clear that a bathroom is not required in a T-hangar unit?
We had not got to the point beyond just the fact is, it was very much a very high-level conversation. We did not get into any of the details beyond just the fact he kind of had a different business model. I said, it's kind of, if you want to come present it, we can at least start having conversations, but we did not get to the details of what's required for facilities in the actual building.
So the answer to the question is no.
Correct. I did not, like I said, I didn't have that level of detail. It was basically kind of the exploratory, is this a possibility? To which I said, yeah, bring your idea forward and we'll see, what the requirements are.
And this is strictly the cost for improving the taxi lane, the taxiway and the taxi lanes. There's no cost if sewer and water and gas.
No, this is just construction of the pavement to get there. So the project is already on the Forest Lake Airport CIP for state fiscal year 2020, which would be July 1, 2019. So as it sits right now, there's nothing the commission needs to undertake. How MnDOT is operating in the past is sometime, next year, Mr. Undrum would receive an email from MnDOT saying funding either has or has not been appropriated for your project. The one thing of note is that the estimate here shows funding breakdown of the state participating at 80%, the local share being 20%. Now, the past 4 years, the state has participated at 90% for Forest Lake and 10% local. As of now, they haven't announced what their funding rates will be for state fiscal years 20 and 21. So there is a possibility that the local share could go down from the projected 72,000 here. So that's something just to kind of keep in mind, and as soon as we hear that information, it'll get distributed to Forest Lake members, so you guys have that kind of moving forward for project decisions for next year. Any questions on?
Yeah, Mr. Undum, do you know what the lease rent to the city of Forest Lake would be on a T-hangar of that size?
I don't recall. I mean, it was kind of like those conversations. I know there was, they were had at one point, and I believe, this is kind of predated my, involvement with it. It was just basically, I remember when the numbers were done, the numbers were kind of crunched. It was tough to get that investment cost. I think when you're looking at the expansion, the extensions required, plus the building cost, plus what you would be able to get in on a per plane basis, per the lease rate. It took a number of years to recoup that investment. I think that's kind of where, we hit the kind of the wall in terms of, being a feasible investment. And I did relay that. I just said my recollection of it was that the numbers were hard to make work.
Right.
So I did let him know that, but he said he had a different business model, and I said, if you can get the numbers to work on your business model.
Right, I mean, we're looking at 6 individual hangars and that T-hangar, which would hold, I'm guessing, at least 8 aircraft in there. And I'm looking at the revenue the city would generate from that, and the 20%, if it is 20%. If it was 10%, if it was 10% instead of 20%, that would be paid off relatively quickly.
Yeah, and I have not done any of like that
No.
level of analysis
Okay.
of this project. This is basically just kind of like the
Yeah.
first,
Okay.
kind of first cut, first, conversation piece on that particular topic.
And again, I'm pointing out that there's no utilities to any of these facilities, so that cost would have to be.
That'd be by the
plugged in.
hangar owners. Wouldn't it? I mean, I had to pay a utility cost to get the utilities out there, so I'm assuming they would as well.
Well, as long as utilities are awash between, the capital
Oh, sure.
improvement fee, yeah,
Right.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we haven't looked at utility or the location. I mean, none of that has basically been done at this point. This was, again,
Yep.
just an initial conversation. So there's a lot of details if this project does go forward, or if they kind of are able to get their funding in order and they really want to pursue it. There's a lot of steps in this process, but this is kind
Right.
of just the first step in that
And
process.
Silas, I see that in your document here has 361,000, and in the CIP, it looks like you have like, just short of 361,000, so.
Yeah, I just rounded up for simplicity purposes on the estimate here.
Thank you.
But you guys brought up a good point about utilities. That hasn't been determined yet, if and where the utilities, the sanitary and water, if they would need to be extended to facilitate construction in these areas, or how that would go about. So if the city does decide we'd want to include those, then the number here would go up, where you'd allow at least connections to be made for sanitary and water.
Silas, is that the largest? It says 200, I'm looking at the T-hanger drawing, 60 feet wide and 264 feet long. Is that the longest that it can go?
You could go longer, but it was just drawn this way because you start getting closer to the wetland.
Right.
Move in that direction. I mean, it's not to saying this is the exact, I think the middle taxi lane that's drawn there is, you might be able to extend it a little bit further, but this is just to kind of give you some visual representation. I mean, obviously, you'd try to construct the taxi lane as long as possible, so you could, and then you might be able to get a box hanger off the end of the T-hanger.
That was my next point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But from my experience, I mean, a 264-foot wide T-hanger, you could get 10 bays in there if you so desired. And 60 feet is kind of on the larger side as well. Most
It is.
commonly, I see 54.
Right, that's what I was going to say, too.
Correct.
That looks big. Dan Undum, are any of the spots, potential spots for the individual hangars there's 6 of them on the drawing, are any of them spoken for, or is there any kind of waiting list for them yet?
At this point, we've had some people inquire about it, but there's nothing official. I mean, again, this is just kind of, these drawings here, I mean, I wouldn't get married to this drawing or this layout. This is just kind of Silas taking back through and just plotting some stuff on a piece of paper. A lot of stuff could change in here. We have had inquiries from people looking to see if there's any possible expansion. Nothing's been formalized yet, and we always let them know that, we have no formal plans. However, when you start getting a lot of inquiries, it's always good to every now and again just take a look at if those numbers can work. Again, I haven't gone through, nobody's gone through and done the analysis to see, what the infrastructure costs would be to get the, these taxi lane extensions done versus how long it's gonna take to recoup that with lease revenues. None of that work has been done. This is, again, just a first cut of this.
Should we take names on a waiting list?
That's been suggested. The issue that we run into is then it becomes a sequence down, I mean, if you're first or you're second, if somebody else goes through and they want to do a lease exchange, and then it's kind of, we're looking at, possibly just saying, we'll take down information if we ever do an expansion, we'll just let people know, but it's not a first come, first serve, it's just kind of a general pool that's there, so to speak. We have nothing formal at this point, but again, they come in waves. We tend to get, a handful here, a handful of inquiries here. It's tough to say too, if they're serious about it, if they're just kind of kicking the tires, it's really kind of tough to judge. But we are getting more inquiries now for a lot leases than we were probably at this time a year ago.
Say, Dan, is there any reason we couldn't build those hangars or let people build those hangars with a grass taxiway there? I mean, I'm looking at the funding this thing's gonna push it out quite a few years. I mean, what would be the drawback of putting those hangars up? And you're gonna get lease rent, and you'll have income to the city.
That would be a question for Silas on that one. I don't.
You certainly could. You may need to make some improvements to the turf, where you peel off the topsoil, drop some aggregate down to get it a little more sturdy, so that if you do get, weather or rainfall events, that it does have some sort of structural stability to it. But there's nothing that's restricting, the airport. If they did say, build it on, if you want to construct there. Now, I mean, I doubt anybody would want north-facing doors. There's nothing restricting anyone from constructing there as it sits with your door facing the existing pavement, but they're just facing north.
I mean, electricity wouldn't be a problem, get to those buildings. I mean, that you can borrow under the ground, correct?
Correct.
So electric wouldn't be a problem, just be no water and sewer, which I think there's quite a few people would not have a problem with that.
It's definitely an option that, there's nothing restricting the city from leasing those spots out now.
And with what you have drawn there now, the green square, 60 by 60 feet, you say future aircraft hangar, but that's the actual pad, though. They would have to
Yeah,
come
that's
in from that. They did,
from there, then you could construct smaller.
yeah,
I mean, that's.
you couldn't go 60 by 60 with a hangar there, or could you?
Sure you could.
You could.
You could, okay, so 60 by 60 would be your maximum there.
Yeah, at one of the previous meetings, Mr. Hart, the zoning, is he zoning or is he the building? zoning had some information that stated, the Forest Lake Code is 10-foot separation,
Yeah.
and you might need to put a firewall along that side.
Mr. Undum, why would we not look to get those leased out, those 6 there, and get the ball rolling on that? It seems weird, there wouldn't be any infrastructure, the taxiway's already there.
Correct, but there's also the utility cost of running utility extensions for sewer and water to those, and that's part of, we've never had the conversation, I mean, that work has not, I don't know where the stubs are, and I tried loading up on my computer, but I couldn't get the utility map to load up. So I don't know what that infrastructure cost is, I mean,
Let's not run them. Let's just run electricity.
It runs right across it would be across the end of these buildings,
is it on is it on, the side adjacent to, or is it in the middle?
on the
of
west side.
North side of it, that's where the utilities are. We've never done pre-planned layouts on that, I mean, again, this conversation kind of started when we had somebody looking for a T-hanger, location. That's kind of where this was in the past, in the beginning of the year, it's kind of where some of the conversations were, the T-hanger discussion was there, that kind of got tabled, it never really got pulled off the table again, or the shelf until the inquiry came in on the T-hanger location, and, again, Silas is kind of, Julius, again, I wouldn't get, too married to this, there's a lot of detail between now and the end where these things could shift a little bit, but.
Right. But just the fact that all of our lots are leased out right now, and there's no more space, and we are getting inquiries, I mean, it's lease rent that the city could be generating from these lots, and.
Correct. And you have to look at the lease rent versus how long it would take for the payback for what the city have to put out for, the fund would put out for the infrastructure improvements that are required. So, I mean, there's some analysis work that needs to be performed on it. It just
Right.
has not been performed at this
Right.
point.
Silas, from a stormwater perspective, everything here ties back, for the most part, everything that's already built out ties back to that pond towards the AD building, from a stormwater runoff perspective. Or at least there's catch basins and it chases it towards that pond.
To be honest, I'm not.
So here's my question. My question is in your price, the price you have in assumes that this could all drain towards the wetland that it's facing?
Correct.
Okay, and you wouldn't need to build storm sewer systems in?
No, the plan here would be to construct the pavement
So it'd
and have
slope
surface
down.
drainage facilitate, yeah,
And it would just slope down to the ponds? Okay.
correct. If that, I mean, we'd have to talk with the watershed district to make sure
Exactly.
if that's allowable, but it appears to me all the other taxi lanes there, there's longitudinal slope to the south and the west. So it seems as though they flow into the grass area that's existing there and
Okay.
works through the network on that side.
Okay.
How much would it take to engineer this and start tossing the ball around?
What you're looking at right now doesn't take much effort to put it down in a layout like here. I believe the city's got a GIS network that has shown where utilities are, so I could plan at the next meeting to kind of show where the utilities are, some extensions of where they would need to go. But there's really, I mean, you're talking about very high-level preliminary layouts here. It doesn't take much for us to put something like that together. If you really wanted to start forward with the design where we'd have to do surveys and what have you, then that's where there's costs that are involved. But at this point, it's still just planning level.
Well, I guess my question is, do we need sewer and water to those hangars?
Now, that was a question I know that the commission here raised because when Mr. Hart came to a previous meeting, he said you got to be, I think, 500 feet or so from a restroom facility. Now, I know the commission asked what my experience is at other airports, and it's, if you desire a restroom facility, you can construct one and run utilities to your own hangar, but I very rarely see restroom facilities. They're mostly cold storage from other general aviation airports that I work with because you're just there to drop your aircraft off and maybe your vehicle, but you're not looking for heating, you're not looking for water because you're not washing anything in there. It's just storage.
Right, I think we had that conversation before, and I think, I know there was some objection from the public on that. Somebody wanted that those utilities be run down there so that if they wanted to put water in their unit, that they could. But then it just comes down to a cost issue
Correct.
of what it would cost to run that, those utilities ahead of time.
Yeah, gas is the only one I've seen run so people could heat their hangar.
Yeah, yeah.
I do see that, with all the other area where the hangars exist now, Well, what I'm getting at here is in order for a car to get to these hangars, they have to come to the end and drive all the way out and then back down in instead of being able to come in through the backside to those hangars. So I was wondering if there's a need for a road on the easterly side to connect up to those taxi lanes.
There definitely could be some revisions made to have a drivable lane where it doesn't have to be the 25-foot wide taxi lane. You could do a 12-foot pass in there just so you can kind of come in on that side.
Well, I just think we should make sure that we don't forget about that in the final plan, so that if we have to change up the location of the hangars, we do that, just so that we don't, I'm not saying we have to have the blacktop right now, but I'd hate to be pinched off to where forever we're forced to bring people down one direction.
He wants to make a loop around the
Nope. Yep.
individual hangars.
I see what he's talking about, kind of on the far east green one there.
Yep.
Right.
Where you have a driveway, so you don't have to,
We should just accommodate enough space in there to put a drive, like you say, a reduced drive, blacktop drive in there.
no, yeah, and I'll,
It keeps cars away from the active taxiway is my point.
That's an excellent point. And that could be extended down here.
Right, right.
any other questions on kind of the,
Is any of that wetland, can you transfer it across? I mean, like that long gooseneck that's sticking out there, could you add this to the other side of the wetland? And
that would be extremely unlikely, just considering the nature of the Rice Creek Watershed District and how protective they are of wetlands. I mean, to do anything along the wetland there would take quite a bit of effort on the city side, where you're talking about mitigation efforts, banking wetland credits in another location, and it's not a one-to-one. If you took out any part of that wetland, you'd have to replace it, and I'm not sure what the participation is, but I'm pretty certain it's not a one-to-one. So it's something that anything could be done, but it just adds cost to the project, and you may not be gaining as much as you'd hope by filling in part of that wetland.
well, I didn't know if it was movable or not, but if you could bring these all down to where the other one's in, you could get a lot more on that end.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't believe, touching the wetland or doing much with them would be, cost reasonable for the project.
I've actually asked questions that there's in other projects to see if we can move wetlands, and I always get short answer, no. Long answer, you can, but the costs go up pretty significantly to mitigate a wetland and do the credit buying, so it's kind of a last resort, but typically I always get the short answer is no.
Well, I would like to see us try to move forward with, unimproved hangars there where they're just, I mean, it's just a cold storage with electricity, and the problem we're gonna run into, we do all this planning, I mean, there's just no money to pay for it.
Correct.
I mean, that's where the problem lies, and nothing will ever get done if we wait for the money to do asphalt and whatnot, and sewer, so. I mean, we can be putting some hangars up there. I know there's people here in the audience that would love to have a hangar over there. And it would be relatively, it would be a lot more reasonable.
I mean, at this point, it's on your CIP for next year. Whether or not the city undertakes the project next year or not, that's dependent upon if MnDOT offers grant funding for it.
If we did put up buildings, Silas, to come in and put the improvements, whether it be cities, the sewer and water and/or the taxiways, that improvement can be done with those hangars there, correct?
Correct.
So I can see no reason why we wouldn't want to move forward.
With at least those 6 you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it may be 5, because to get a driveway kind of on the northeast side there, it may be pretty tight to the existing, or so that 6 spot, and trying to figure out how far we are from the wetland.
Could you make those last two hangars 50 by 50s rather than 60 by 60s and squeeze that road in? So we
The
can still
lot
have
size here is 60
Yeah.
by 60. It doesn't mean that the hangar itself
Yeah. You're
would be
right.
constructed, and that's just consistent with the other, based on what we've seen from the ALP, every other lot size here is
Yeah.
60 by 60.
Well, if you shrunk them each down 5 foot even. Each lot 5 foot, you'd give you plenty on the.
I'm not sure, I mean, how big is Mr. Steeler and Mr. Schmidt's hangars that are being constructed now?
I mean, my hangar is 60 by 60.
Okay, so you
But
want
the
the,
lot is, what, 80 by whatever?
80 by 80.
80 by 80, I
90,
think.
80 by,
okay, so there are larger lots on
Yeah.
different areas there.
And again, you're serving a different clientele. Some people want a heated hangar, some people don't.
yeah, the lots are 80 by 120, 30 feet
Okay.
on front and back for setback and 80 feet wide. Thank you.
I do think it would be worth knowing what it would cost as cold storage without utilities, and what the cost of adding the water sewer would be for those 6 hangars. Leaving enough space for a 12-foot road to go behind
Sure.
between the wetland and the one hangar. If we got to skinny up the hangar to 55 feet or a couple of them to 55. I'm just, as the others are saying, I don't think that cost would probably be that much. I mean, there'd be 2 costs there, one with utilities, one without, but there would be no reason we couldn't, if we did choose to go without the utilities, I mean, the cost to the city seems pretty minor for those 6.
There's 3 levels of utilities you're talking about here. One is full utilities, sewer and water, gas, and electricity. The other option is gas and electricity. So you got heat for an insulated hangar, and you can insulate it later. And the third option is just electricity, okay? Those are 3 options.
Okay.
So when you say with utilities or without utilities, I want to make sure we're specific, so we're all talking about the same thing.
I think we need to continue planning this in preparation for funding pavement, in preparation for the CIP, but also that gives us the knowledge that Tim has asked about, you've asked about, I've asked about to see if it's feasible to move forward. Because obviously it's a recommendation of the council, so we have to make sure numbers work and
I think
and
that's-
drainage would work prior to any hard surface taxi lanes going in.
And I think that's the key, like, when we looked at, say, lot 1, at the beginning of the year, that was kind of, you start looking at it, you do adjustments to that lot, you have to go and you're triggering a watershed permit, you're triggering different water store, I mean, there's a whole thing, that you look at this paper, it seems like it could be a pretty straightforward, you go out there, put the surveyor and put 4 lots down and boom, but then you start looking at what the actual steps are in that process, and those costs can escalate. I mean, I'd say we can start doing some of that math, but it's also the way the airport commission funded. If you remember back to August meeting, we started talking about the possibility of getting on that payment management strategy to make sure that we're taking care of the airport. So
Right.
there's a whole bunch of kind of different things in the air. So again, this may look like a simple chip shot of I'm not saying it's not going to be, I'm just saying there could be some costs that are not being, that we don't
Okay.
know about right now. So those costs could be pretty significant by the time you get everything accounted for that you would need to do the development of these additional lots.
Good point. We had the T hangar, the original T hangar was part of our original concept, which was part of our original watershed work that was done, which there should be some correlation between that T hangar and these individual ones, but adding the T hangar to the other side, they might pick that up and start.
Yeah, and that's all would need to be all analyzed, if this was originally envisioned as part of the original water management plan for this whole area or not. There's a whole bunch of kind of unknown questions on the technical side that need to be addressed, so we have a long way to go. And at any one of these steps, these costs can come back as, pretty burdensome. However, at least, this is kind of step 1. And again, like I said before, it started with somebody wanting to put a T hangar in there, and I kind of said we had to have a conversation at one point. I knew Silas kind of had this, and he just kind of went through and didn't update. Is it even feasible to put one out there? It is if you do some additional work out there. So it kind of starts the conversation.
Good.
All right, well, I'll plan for the next meeting to kind of bring another layout showing utility extensions to that area and revise the cost estimate, so we have kind of some more meat to discuss at that time. And kind of the last thing on my list, we talked about the pavement management program, kind of a 20-year maintenance plan to kind of keep the pavements and protect the investment that the city has made at the airport there. We talked about just kind of taking the project management plan and just inserting that information into the CIP, where it doesn't obligate the city, obviously, for completing those projects, but at least it lets MnDOT know that you have a plan in place so that when you're looking for funds for pavement maintenance, you can point to your CIP and say it's been on there for that year or it's been on there in previous years. So it just gives you another feather in your cap when discussing MnDOT about that. And the kind of last thing, Rick, was there any update on the Pappies?
Every month.
John Schroeder did get a hold of me, and he said that, that board has just been a problem, and he was gonna come out yesterday, but it was raining, so he said he'd be out today. I did not hear from him today.
They were out today.
They were out today? Okay. So he was gonna replace the board and keep track of it, and we can contact him at any time, so.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Number 4, Goose Relocation Program.
I put this on because every year in September, we talk about this. In previous years, we've had a group called Capable Partners come in, and they're hunters with disabilities that have access to the airport and they can shoot geese. I don't know how to get a hold of them. We've done this every year in September and to talk about this because we get a lot of geese out there and they can go hunt them. That's why I put it on there.
They were relocating geese today.
I happened to be out there on Sunday or Monday and Council Member Husnick was out there with another gentleman that was, they were discussing a program. I don't see them here tonight, but taking care of some of the problem. I don't know if they're relocating them from the sky to the ground, maybe.
That's the idea, yeah.
But,
They relocated at least a dozen birds today.
okay.
The reporter from the Star Tribune emailed me to find out about the geese relocation agenda item. And I explained, the hazard of geese to airports and aircraft, and then I passed along Sam's city council email address to her. So.
Okay, but Mr. Schmidt, if you do have a contact for that organization,
Mr. Husnick
I would
does.
pass it on to Mr. Husnick, okay.
Mr.
yeah.
Husnick does.
Yeah,
That's,
that sounds like.
he's no longer on the council, so that's why, on the commission, so that's why.
Yeah. All right, that's it for the items on the agenda. Does anybody on the commission have anything they want to add that's not on there? Mr. Ashbeck?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Dan, I was in the AD building today, and I was just wondering with the chairs, we have the two desks and chairs, and I was wondering if there's a couple of mats, the chair mats that could be put down just to kind of save the carpet around.
I can take a look at that.
And then I worked with Dave Adams. He checked out the barrels. Jim Schultz told me there's a couple of barrels that had some liquid and looked like oil as well in there, and he was concerned about them. And Dave Adams went out and looked, and and that's over on the north end by Bill's shed, the lone building where the outside lighting is. So Dave went out there and looked at it, and he's gonna take care of that. What else? Dave also said that the gauges are now working on the tanks, so that the gauges for the fuel in the tanks is accurate, and he said I think it was like 1 foot 5 inches each tank, and they'll get a load here in a few weeks. And I mentioned to him that the lights for the Daniel A. DePani was out the other day, on the AD building, the Daniel A. DePani Memorial Airport signs, so he was gonna replace those in time, so that's it.
Anybody else? No additions? I will take, did you have something? I'm sorry.
Just a piece of local aviation information. I think Sampson's property across the freeway might be for sale. I drove by there today, and there's a farm there, and there's a runway there. Was it 5 miles to the west? And I thought it was for sale.
I'm
So,
not familiar with it.
yeah, they had an aircraft junkyard out there and so forth. It's just across from the gas station on Lake Drive. And I think it's for sale, so keep an eye out for that.
All right, any others from the floor? Mr. Schultz? What would a meeting be without Mr. Schultz?
I don't know whether to be concerned or flattered by name. A few days, weeks ago, there was a young man out by the west gate on the north end of the airport. Let's see, to describe it, northwest of the threshold for runway 13. There's a gate that's put up over there along
It's been there forever.
Fenway, yes, that gate. There was a couple of signs there that said something like airport keep out. I think those have been removed and they're just sort of leaning or laying flat now. So you might ask Mr. Adams to drive by and look at the condition of those signs. Also, in May, we had a break-in in Hangar Echo. Since then, there's been some improvements made with a gate being moved and a barrier being put up. We had talked about putting a security light down by Hangar Echo. Wondered what the status of that was. I don't think anything's been done with it yet.
We circled back with Excel a couple of times. We're still getting the quote estimate on it. I talked to Dave yesterday actually about it, and he's gonna reach back out again. We're still waiting to hear back from Excel. I know it's been time, but we've reached out to them multiple times to get the quote, just to make sure that we have the right pricing to get those poles and lights extended out there.
Okay, look forward to getting it moved and lit up. I have a kind of a general question, an inquiry to the commission. What is the intention for Mr. Olson as far as the commission knows? He had talked about building a great big hangar kind of over by the gas pumps and building another smaller hangar. I think it was lot 6. I'm just curious, what's the latest with that gentleman?
Lot 6.
But he's the one that we renegotiated lot 1,
Lot
lease
1.
out for. We have not got a building permit application at this point, so I haven't actually heard much in terms of where he's at with this project. He basically, from the city's perspective, he's green lit. If he gets the building permit in, it goes through the normal review process, but we haven't got the application in at this point, so we haven't heard anything back. Plus, he did get his lease changed back in, I think it was May.
He was working out the language of the lease
Yeah,
with the city
that was
attorney.
negotiated out, and then, he committed, he's gonna come back in with building plans, and we haven't heard back from him at this point.
Was he given the opportunity for a 35-year lease?
I don't recall the details on
Or-
it was longer than standard, it had renewal periods based.
Dan, I think we granted a 5-year extension.
Yeah, there was extensions based, it was like extensions to, I don't have the full details in front of me in terms of what the lease.
So he was offered more than the 25
Yes.
anyway.
Commercial, completely commercial entity, correct.
Did he also, is his also intention, is he also intending to develop a hangar at, I believe it's lot number 6?
That's under lease, but that was not discussed as part of the original lease extension. That was only lot 1 that the lease was extended on. So,
Okay, for lot number 1, you mentioned because it's a commercial operation, you've granted extended lease. Has the commercial operation been defined?
he had defined it at the time as a leasing operation where people could come in and store a plane that he rented out. He had kind of a cavalcade of different uses that was gonna be out there, all aeronautical use, all commercial based. You know, some of it was gonna be a financing operation for airplanes. There was kind of a host of different options that he had kind of presented at the time, but he didn't present like the actual business plan of these are the 3 things I'll be doing out there. He kind of threw a bunch of options on the table, but they all were commercially viable.
I recognize the benefit to the airport to have commercial operations of different aviation-related businesses going on there. As an aviation-related business person, I watched that gentleman come in, welcomed with open arms. He threw out a bunch of ideas, and generally people said, great, go for it. Some of those things at the scale at which he was going to enter them into eliminate some possibilities for me. For instance, he's talking about, or was at one of the meetings I attended, having a flight school. And he had talked about, well, he's got 2 or 3 or 4 different airplanes. He's going to put them online. Sounded like single engine, multi-engine complex. He's ready to go. Me, I've been thinking about maybe putting a 172 available for lease out there for training and rental. There's no way that that could compete with that gentleman's other business. So I'm trying to define what's he approved to do, and does anybody know? I'm basically trying to determine whether or not it's worth me even considering hunting for a 172 any longer to put out there. Because I don't think I'll have much ability to compete with a larger facility with several well-equipped aircraft. So that's the basis of my question.
With respect to the airport commission, he really didn't come before us on any of it. He went right to the city council. He was here for one meeting, briefly talked, and then it was more in front of the city council and working with them on the lease. Because I know I never saw a business plan. It was always a question.
He'd never presented, so I can't speak to what his flight school, I mean, I know that, I mean, it was literally kind of a whole bunch of different ideas, and I think, there wasn't a defined, he never presented a business plan as part of his, option. I gave him the opportunity during his presentations to kind of define what his uses were gonna be, and again, it was, some of it was, from what I was heard during the meetings were finance operations, flight school operations, mechanic operations, paint booth operations, so there's kind of a whole host of things that were presented, so I don't know exactly what's going in there. I do know that they are gonna be aeronautical use commercial businesses, but that's a broad term, but he didn't give the specific as of, this date, this type of operations going in there.
Even if he did have a flight school operation, I don't know that that would preclude you from being able
No.
to have the same. I mean, Lake Elmo has, of course, vaulters, and there's other individuals down there that teach flight.
I'm certainly familiar with that. Thank you for
Yeah.
being open to the idea of allowing it. It's just that it wouldn't, I wouldn't be any competition. So I'm just trying to understand what's likely to
Sure.
be there. Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Is number 8 under lease? Number 8 hangar out there? I heard he had that to start with, but then he let it go.
Number 6, you mean?
Pardon?
Are you talking Chris Olson's?
The
Or
number 8, the one right alongside of mine?
As far as I know, all lots out there are leased out. I don't know who has that. My computer's frozen right now, so I can't get it. But as far as I know, everything is leased out. We're fully leased out there.
Did I see there's some markers for utilities and stuff in front of it, but we haven't seen anything about somebody leasing it.
That's Chad. Chad has got that.
Pardon?
Lot 8, next to you.
Yeah.
Chad Walkerstorfer. I can never say his last name right, but
And he just took that lease down last fall, right?
yeah, he's got his building permit approved. Yep.
Anything else? Commission members or anyone from the public? No? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
I didn't make a motion. I was just asking if there was a motion to adjourn.
I'll third it.
Okay, we have two motions.
Dahlbeck, Ashback, started motion and second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.